Hey, welcome back. It's Sarah from Roadworthy for a weekly reads. This week I feel like I'm back in my groove. Yeah, the holidays are over, although my tree is still up, the stockings are still up. But I'm back in my groove. And then I'm also shifting gears because I'm traveling next week to visit my parents in Florida. So next week's weekly reads might look a bit different, and I hope I'm wearing a t-shirt. But anyway, yeah, so when I travel, you know how it is, right? As a bookish person, right? You got to figure out what am I reading? What am I packing? What I got to load up the Kindle, And then two, if you're me, you got to organize your knitting and make sure you have something small enough to take with you. I also just have a ton of other crafting projects going on. So I'm anyway, it's a bit chaotic at the house right now, but, that's all been great because, I have been getting some reading in, and let's hop to it. So what did I get to this week? I did get to and finish Beyond the Door of No Return by David Diop. This is translated by Sam Taylor. This was recently discussed by Brian at Bookish and Ross of Scally Dandling about the books, and I'll link both of their videos below. I'm not sure I have a super ton more to say about this than they have already said, but this is about Michael Adamson, who is a French botanist in the mid-19th century who travels to Senegal to study the flora and fauna. This is obviously at the height of the slave trade, and Senegal is very much a part of a big part of that. And the French are very much a big part of, controlling, some of the trade coming out of Africa. David Diop is a professor of 18th century French literature. And so at times, this does really feel like a book of that period, which was kind of fun. But this is a really the story is framed as Adamson leaving a journal for his daughter to discover, that really in that journal he is describing his trip to Senegal. And part of that is his adventure of traveling in Senegal to investigate the legend story of Miriam, who is supposed to be a local woman who was sent to America as a slave, but has come back. So he gets a little intrigued by this story, and he sets out to investigate. This does, and then, plot ensues, and sort of adventure ensues. This almost had a little bit of a feel of Joseph Conrad's The Heart of Darkness in there. But anyway, so, you have him telling this story in a journal. So it's really his interpretation of events. And he even says in the journal writing, this is what I recall. Wolof, the language that's spoken, it's not easy to translate into French, so there's he acknowledges some translation challenges. So as a reader, you're sort of left wondering how much of this story is true. and being accurately presented, and how much is Adanson sort of complicit with French colonialism, and how much is he really like apart from it. And then it also ends with the story of a painting, and I'm throwing this in there because the painting is a portrait of Madeleine. It used to be called Portrait of a Negress, by Mary Guillaume Benoit. I'm totally butchering that, I know, but I always was struck by that painting, and I'm going to put up here because it's the American cover of Marlon James's The Book of Night Women. And so if you recognize that cover, that painting is also referenced in this book. Also in kind of an interesting way, you have Adanson's, him telling the story of this painting as he knows it. But then at the very end, you get Madeleine, the woman who is the subject of the painting, also giving her story about the painting. So throughout the book, you get these layers of stories and differing perspectives on the story, right? So what is the truth here, and how the story shifts depending on the perspective of the person telling it. So there are moments in this book where, like I said, there's reference, I felt like, you know, Heart of Darkness, but there's also like this sense of Adanson exotifying sort of his experiences and what he's seeing. There's a component too where he sort of has this insta-love with Meram, that again, he feels like he's objectifying and exotifying her, and it's not really clear, like, does he really like see her as a person? Anyway, I enjoyed this book, but I did get hung up on the fact that this is not All Night Blood is Black, which won the International Booker. That's a really unfair statement to expect every book that this guy writes is going to be amazing. But you know, you've really got to be prepared that these are two very different books. And I almost would say, if you haven't read All Night Blood is Black, this is, you'll probably appreciate this book more than perhaps I did. And anyway, I'll leave it there. And then I read Betty by Tiffany Daniel. This was a buddy read with my friend Lori, and this is part of my reading for the Past and Future Readathon. This is a book inspired by Tiffany Daniel's mother, Betty. This is about their biracial family. So Betty's dad is Cherokee and her mother is white. And this is taking place mostly like 50s, 60s, and 70s. There are lots of trigger warnings here. This book gets very dark. In this family, there are 3 sons, 3 daughters, as well as the parents, and they end up living in Appalachian, Ohio. And there's racism in the town. There's interesting sort of colorism in racism within the family, which is very interesting. Betty herself looks very much like her dad, and so there's a lot of comments about her being really dark, whereas like her sister Freya, who's the beautiful one, is the blonde of the family. But anyway, this is just, it's a lot about the family relationships, the family dynamics, her really sort of fierce love for her sisters and her younger brothers. Her relationship with her father is so beautiful. They work in the garden together. He's a dreamer and a storyteller and really inspires her storytelling and encourages her to just sort of never lose that spark of her imagination and to always keep telling stories. There's mental illness in here. There's, a lot of it is a sort of the crappiness of being poor, not white in rural America. Betty is such a wonderful character, and sort of throughout this book, you're really cheering for her and really hoping she gets out. That she's able to sort of rise above these circumstances and move on and find sort of joy and happiness and purpose in her life. I have also read her earlier book, The Summer That Melted Everything, and I loved that book as well. And I really loved Betty. And there are a few little Easter eggs in here between both books. So this book takes place in Breathitt, Ohio, which is the same town where The Summer That Melted Everything takes place. At the end of this book, she encounters Autopsy Bliss and his two sons, and they're the main characters in The Summer That Melted Everything. So that also was a fun little extra treat in here. But really loved this. And then I was listening to The End of Drum Time by Hanna Pylvainen. And this was a finalist for the National Book Award this year. This is a historical fiction about the mid-19th century up in very northern Scandinavia. And at this period of time, this area of, what is called Lapland, is very much the borders between Sweden, Norway, Finland, Russia. It's all very amorphous. And the Sami, the indigenous peoples of that part of the world, are also sort of in this mix. And so the story is really sort of the illicit love affair. It's sort of billed as the illicit love affair between a Sami reindeer herder and the daughter of the Lutheran priest. Yes, that is sort of the major plot in the book, but what I really liked about the book was more of sort of that story on a larger political backdrop. So this is a period in time where Sweden and Russia are really arguing about control of this land. Finland is part of Russia at this time. Sweden is sort of controls Norway and is, so Sweden and Russia are sort of bickering, and the Sami are sort of getting caught in the middle of these arguments, and you also have, a little bit more locally, a lot of Christian settlers coming in and, establishing farms and communities. And all of this impacts Sami, who are nomadic people. They are reindeer herders, and they travel to their summer grazing grounds and winter grazing grounds, and so settlers moving in and sort of disrupting their migration routes, and Russia suddenly saying we're putting a border, we're going to enforce the border, and Sami are being told they need to choose which nationality they're going to be. So it's really all of these pressures on Sami culture and language. What I really loved about this book was the atmosphere. Again, I'm such a sucker for place and atmosphere, particularly in my historical fiction. It's cold, it's gray, there's snow. Like you can just, you get sort of immersed in the cold and the wind and no sun, and there's the reindeer and bells and skiing. All of these things I just really appreciated. Again, that atmosphere, but then again the larger cultural, political context that this book is set in, for me, made this a great reading experience. What am I currently reading? So currently I'm listening to A History of Burning by Janika. This is like the perfect, immersive, multi-generational saga about an Indian family that goes to Uganda, and then what happens when Idi Amin comes to power and he expels all the Asiatics. What happens. So great. This is perfect to accompany me when I'm, embroidering, knitting, working on the puzzle, like, all my things, right? And then I'm also reading The Strangers by Katerena Vermette. This is also part of my Past and Future readathon, TBR. But this, I just started. I don't want to say too much other than she's a great writer. I loved The Break. I thought that book was amazing, and I can tell The Strangers is going to be great too. So that's what I got going on this week, and I hope you're having a great week. Hope you're reading some good things, and I hope you're back in the swing of your normal routines now that the holidays are over. And like I said, I will hopefully be posting next week's weekly reads from Florida. See ya.